Thanks so much, Garik, for joining me today. If anybody wants to hear our initial conversation, that would be in episode 65. I'll link it down below in the show notes. A lot has happened since then with Eco-Stylist. But first, give a little bit an overview of what sort of Eco-Stylist was in the beginning, and then we'll get into what it is now and the growing features that the platform has going on.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, thanks for having me back. It's a pleasure to be here. So Eco-Stylist is a resource for stylish and ethical clothing. Basically, what that means is we have a directory of thoroughly researched brands. There's more than 60, and we're going to be adding quite a few by the end of the year. Then we also have fashion guides. So in our blog, we have all kinds of articles that are really popular that help people learn about sustainable fashion or shop for like fall or Christmas gifts, stuff like that. Then we also have personal styling. Basically, I like to think of Eco-Stylist as like a zero to hero kind of service. I guess I don't want to use that word, but basically like the idea being like, if you want to come just use the free tools and make finding, good brands easier for you, you can. Or if you want to come and you want to be like, hey, just please do this for me because I don't want to do it. That's where personal styling comes in, and you can pay us to do like personal shopping for you, or like a total makeover where we like go through your closet with you and also do personal shopping for you and like make style guides and stuff. So yeah, it's a pretty thorough service.
Well, you started originally with just men's clothing, right? Because the ecosystem was not catering to us gentlemen very much before you came along. So what was it like to add women's apparel and sort of that big ecosystem? Obviously, women kind of dominate the market here, but like why deviate straight just from being sort of a men's platform?
Yeah, so we were focused on menswear exclusively for, I think it was like 2+ years before we added women's clothes. And we didn't like lose the focus. Like it's basically, we started with menswear because there was, like you were saying, there was like a hole in the space. It felt like if you were a guy and you wanted like to shop sustainably, it was like really annoying, like really hard. Like you couldn't find the brands, and like nobody was writing like articles for you or like giving like brand roundups and stuff. So it was just like a lot of work. And so we focused there, and then like other people started to do it too. And so it was like, we were like, okay, well, we feel like we've built a strong resource for people and we're not the only ones doing it anymore. And so but at the same time, a lot of our users were women, like even when it was just men's clothes, it was a lot of times, women are helping men shop, or they're shopping for a man they know. And so we were like, this kind of just makes sense to add, to basically just make it a resource for everybody, while still obviously having that strength of being a really strong resource for men.
You mentioned the personal grooming side, an assistant, if you will, side of the platform that you sort of rolled out. It's a really, really interesting idea. Did that come before or after COVID? Did COVID have any type of impact in building out that feature? Because it seems to be really well placed sort of for like this new era of sort of remote, shopping for fashion, which kind of hasn't, it's sort of always kind of been there, but not at scale like it is now. Did that play a role at all in the kind of doing the personal styling?
It was a good time, I would say, for it, because kind of a fun fact, we've actually been doing virtual personal styling like almost for the entirety of Eco-Stylist. Like in the beginning when I started this, people would ask me to do it in person sometimes.
Right.
And then I was like, well, this isn't really practical because like not everybody's going to be like in Iowa City where I was in the beginning, So I added video, but I just kept it really quiet because like we wanted to stay focused. And I was like, if we make too much noise about this, like it's going to distract us from the other things we do. But we still did it on the side. Around COVID, we realized like, hey, all of a sudden they're more accepting of using video. Like, so that was the major difference. Before COVID, people were like, I don't know if I want to use like video calls for personal styling. That sounds weird. And then I think we all became like way more accustomed to Zoom. So so it became it became more accepted. And then, and we started promoting it more and building out that service. And I hired a stylist so that it wasn't me doing it. So so basically we built it in just because that's not, like that's impossible. You can't divide yourself that thin, so and she's, all she does is styling and she's really good at it. So it just, so basically we've just built it into a better service.
Walk me through the service in general, right? So like if I do something like this, do you literally just walk through my closet with me, or do you walk through like what I like to wear, what colors I like, things like that? Like, talk me through the process.
Yeah, it's a really personalized service. So that's the really important thing to us. And it's always been, is we never wanted to prescribe, style or options for somebody. Basically, it's like with every service, so there's 3 services, and it basically just kind of gets like built on each one. So I'll just say so we'll just talk about like the highest level service because it has all the components to it.
Yep.
So it always starts with a call where the stylist learns about you and what you're looking for. And and it doesn't matter if because some people don't always know what they're looking for, and that's okay, right? But the point is, whether you know exactly what it is or you have like a really vague idea, she'll just like ask you those questions and figure it out. And then from that call, depending on the service, the next steps would happen. So if it's just the personal shopping service, which is a pretty express service, she would basically build you a shopping guide. You get like your own personal website that has the shopping guide, and it's like really beautiful and like easy to look at. And then the higher levels of service that come after that, basically they come with like an outfit guide that includes the clothes you have. If you need new clothes, it's like that's there in the shopping guide, but it's also like here's how to wear what you have and how to wear the new with the old. And then the highest level one includes a closet clean out where the stylist they're usually like 90 minutes. These things usually take a while, but it's usually like a 90-minute video call where they go through your closet with you, and that's always really impactful. Like honestly, that service, like it really
that's super cool. Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah, a lot of people will describe it as like a life-changing service because it's like a lot of times we just have stuff in there that we don't like, but we refuse to get rid of it, or we don't know how to wear it, or it doesn't fit us. And the stylist can help you work through all of that. Like try it out, like maybe realize like, oh, wait, this actually looks great on me. I just didn't know it, or like it doesn't fit. I need to get it tailored, or like, oh, I actually do hate it. Time to do something with it instead of keep it in my closet, right? So basically we like walk you through like those decisions.
And then obviously like through the shopping guide, it would be certified brands that Eco-Stylist has recommended, has curated, correct?
Yeah, and that is something really unique about our personal styling is like, I think we're the only personal styling service that has a certified source of branding that I'm aware of. Like I think there's some other people doing it like with a focus on sustainability, but I believe we're the only service where it's like we have a research pool of brands that we're pulling from, and that's it. So I guess it just adds that extra level of integrity when it comes to the brands, when it comes to like what brands we're working with.
I want to talk a little bit about the industry, and we've kind of been in it for a while, and you're sort of day to day in the weeds, kind of talking and seeing what's going on. What has been sort of the last couple of years? I mean, especially like with COVID, have you seen a lot of brands coming out, like new brands? Have you seen maybe some brands not make it? What's sort of the sector right now as we kind of transition from a really terrible time to hopefully a less terrible time? What does it look like for the sustainable fashion market right now?
Yeah, I think it's a great time for the market. I know because I know a lot of founders from like really small to like like to like just starting and have like a few sales to to like much bigger brands, and I think it's really the ones who struggled were the ones on that first end. Like the ones I know that really struggled were the ones that didn't have much traction before COVID. When that's where you're starting, right? With like, and you really need sales, and COVID wasn't a great time for sales, especially in the beginning. I know they had a really tough time, but none of the brands that that I've worked with or known personally didn't make it. And I think, so I mean, and the space has been growing. Like one way that we've always kind of measured like that the space is growing too is just the number of competitors that we have has continued to grow ever since we started. And it's a good sign. Like it's like a sign of like a healthy space and a space that's that's growing. The sustainable fashion market is in a good place. One thing that maybe concerns me is like, while this is really good news, at the same time, fast fashion actually has also been growing. So it's sort of like, so we have kind of both things growing at the same time. And I think it's just sort of something to be aware of, that like, it's not, fast fashion is not on decline yet. And just something to kind of remember, I think.
I think, look, the glaring part of all this is sort of cost, right? And fast fashion is cheap, right? And that's why a lot of people go towards it. And it's really sort of education, I think, that I want to do at Cause Artist, you want to do Eco-Stylist, other platforms try to do is around education, right? And maybe why it's important to spend a little bit of extra money to get something more, durable, longer lasting, made from better materials and made by people who have, rights and working conditions that are valid, that we ourselves would want. Do you think that cost is the only thing sort of preventing people from making the transition?
There may be other factors, but I would definitely say it's the biggest and most important one. I think it's the one that I think, if we were able to overcome in whatever way, that would be the sort of the tipping point. And you're right, it's a really complicated conversation because cost is, and it's one that I've had, in so many discussion circles, and it's like, it's really hard to get away from because we And I think the thing that people need to know is that the brands that have cost as their strategy are aware of this. Like they know that cost is like emotional for us. For this was like a probably like a decades long plan in terms of like they knew that if they, you know, if they made cost a really important value to shoppers, that it would be really hard to move shoppers then away from that, because you get this like emotional attachment to it where you're like, no, this is affordable for me, this is what I can afford, and your emotions and your feelings really have nothing to do with the brand, and they can keep you buying from a brand that's like terrible for people on the planet because you have your own thoughts about like cost and what's affordable for you. And so it's just a really hard position to move from. And I think, you know, that's why fast fashion has been sticking, is because that's just, yeah, it's a hard place. Like obviously people will have those conversations and people will say like, you know what, I want to spend more for quality. But for every one person that does that, you know, there's plenty of other people who are still like, you know, I don't know, you know, because the cost is so low. And yeah, it's just hard to move away from that.
What do you see some of the stylistically though? Have you seen different trends happening as far as, does it follow the same trends as fast fashion, or do you see that the sustainable fashion industry sort of differentiates itself by style, right? Is that something that could separate itself where the style is different, so like cost is okay to spend more just because it also looks different as well as not just the materials?
The probably overarching trend is that sustainable fashion brands tend to focus on more timeless styles.
Mm-hmm.
You know, what that means varies though, right? Like it doesn't, I don't want people to think it means it's only basics, because that's true for some brands. Some brands will focus on basics, and but I think what timeless means to one brand to another is different. So in my mind, we're getting a wider and wider range of styles that is like better and better. And because that's always been my curiosity, like from the beginning, that was my initial, the initial itch that I was scratching was just that. It was that like, I want to build a wardrobe only with sustainable brands, and like, can I do that and be able to have like the style I want? That was like literally the question that I had. And I've only seen that so I think about that all the time, and I've only seen it get better. So I really feel like we're in a really good place there. It doesn't have like the same trends that fast fashion does, because that would be, you know, impossible to replicate since it's happening every week virtually. But those also don't last, you know? So like why,
Yeah.
it's not really an investment, you know, if it's out of style next week. So with sustainable brands, they're focusing on things that like you can wear for years, and so the style's a little different, and it's, you know, and some of the brands have really cool style, and really some of them, you know, I'm seeing more brands with like some kind of fashion forward component to it, and I think, you know, that's really cool to see too.
Speaking of sort of like fast fashion and sort of, you know, really large brands and corporations out there, they're getting into the space too, right? They're getting into sustainable fashion, or however they want to call it, right? Or whatever definition that anybody wants to define it as. Big companies are getting into it. How do you kind of wrestle with that as a consumer, right? And maybe let's go with you first, and then we'll maybe go on to some of the founders you talk to, you know, that have these smaller brands. Like, how do they feel about these bigger companies trying to kind of do what they do?
Obviously there's like a spectrum of debates, you know, in the space on this, that a lot of people are like, will say like some good step in the right direction is worth noting, you know, even if it's not perfect. And while like generally I would agree with that, when it comes to fast fashion, I tend to have a position where I don't really agree with that when it comes to fast fashion, because basically, so this is sort of my approach to it, in my opinion about it, is that when it comes to fast fashion, the thing is like, I think the whole thing is misleading, and that's why we talk about it a lot, and we continue to talk about it, and we will continue to talk about it, and the reason it's misleading is because they're doing things like they're promising like 100%, you know, sustainable fabrics by 2030, right? Things like this.
Yeah.
So they're making these long-term promises that are far away, that are also like, the brands we work with, most of them are doing this right now. Like as of like 2021, they have 100% sustainable fabrics. Not all of our brands, to be clear, but like, you know what I mean? Because like we rank our brands on so many different factors, but a lot of our brands are already there. And so they're promising these things like by 2030, you know, and they're promising like no fast fashion brand has addressed living wages. So that's that's a huge glaring issue that, you know, obviously so many of our brands focus on that. And so, but at the end of the day, if by 2030, which first of all, I don't know why anybody would want to wait that long, it's so far away, but let's say by 2030, like, you know, H&M pays living wages and has 100% sustainable fabrics, right? The thing that I just want to point out is like they're still not going to be equal to the brands that we work with because of the business model, right? That's still like the glaring issue is that like even when they have those two things that like they were way behind on, they're still going to have that business model that's producing, like I think Zara, I was just looking at the numbers, like Zara makes like 400 million pieces a year or something, and they're planning to ramp that up. And then you have these new like superpower fast fashion brands like Shein that are probably going to overtake Zara and like in volume, and they're even worse. Like they have like no transparency and basically, but that's that model, right? It's that mass consumption. Even if they do these small things, they have a mass consumption model that's going to be always there. And so I think we just have to reject that, or we have to push back against it to be like, hey, this is crazy. And the argument that I read their papers, like the CEOs always make this argument of they'll be like, haha, well, the population is growing. And it's like, well, no, like, if like with what is it like, like they say like 3 out of 5 fast fashion garments that have in the trash, that's within like a year. I think it's even more than that if you project further out. So when you look at that, it's like if this stuff's ending up in the trash, it has nothing to do with the growing population, right? I probably said enough about that.
do you feel that founders feel the same way as well?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I mean, I guess
so. They're not worried, I guess, right? Like they would come take their market share because do they seem like their consumer is probably not their consumer? Their consumer is different than maybe a consumer that would kind of always do the Zara or the Shein or something like that, right?
Yeah, exactly. Like the founders that I work with and I talk to, like I think they never express concern about fast fashion because I think they know and they're confident in how their value proposition is different and how their product is better from like a ethics or sustainability perspective and how the quality, right? So they never really express those kind of concerns or insecurities with me, and I don't think they have them because they know that like they know what their value proposition is, they know what they're putting forward and they believe in it and all of that. So like they're really expecting players like Eco-Stylist to be calling out fast fashion, but like I think most of them don't really bother to because they have other things to do. And so like there's and whereas like we can have these conversations and they I think they're pretty confident in what they're doing and it's working.
How do you look at sort of, let's say like the Banana Republics, right? Brands that necessarily aren't quote unquote fast fashion. They're not slow fashion. They're not sort of sustainable, but they're kind of in that in between. And if they flip a switch in a certain way, which again, their business model doesn't say that they can, so they probably won't. Is that a bit more of a worry maybe? Is that much more of a competitor to those smaller brands that are doing sustainability right? If one of these bigger brands that aren't really fast fashion, that they take a turn?
It could be. I mean, that's a really interesting question. I mean, a lot of these brands just move so slow. So, I mean, I really feel like, the sustainable brands have really positioned themselves well, especially because if they've got a strong foot, in the market where people like know of the brand, they like what they're doing and they know why it's more sustainable and all that, like it's going to be hard, I think, for one of these brands to be a serious threat to them because they have a lot of work to do, like, and they move so much slower. I don't know, from my perspective, like a lot of brands are like way more behind than I thought they would be, like I thought, like, you know what I mean? Because like it's
hard to flip the switch. Yeah, it's hard because it affects the bottom line. It's more of an investment.
It is, but I guess at the same time, like I think this wave has been coming for a while, and so I definitely think they should have been paying a little more attention because, like, if they're not ready when it really hits, like, I think they're going to be the ones that are in trouble, honestly.
So let's say like one of these brands that are well known, right? Have a big footprint online, physical retail, like Banana Republic or something like that. How would you suggest consumers look at, if they have a sustainability section on their website, right? Or in store, they have a sustainability section where you can shop, quote unquote, sustainability from these stores, whether it's online or in physical retail. How would you recommend shoppers like educate themselves to know that this is what it says it is, right? That's always a difficulty. It's kind of like food when you go and there's all these different labels on food. And then if some food don't have these labels, like that's like a clear defined figure that you can look at as a consumer, but there's not quite that yet for fashion. So I guess what would you recommend people look for to know that they're getting something that they think they're getting?
Yeah, no, that's a really good question. I mean, I really recommend that people like support the brands that are going all in rather than that's just kind of, I know that maybe that seems like an extreme position to some people, but and obviously that's that's what we do, and that's and like I work exclusively with these brands and stuff, but I really believe that because these brands are the one they really could use support because they're small brand, a lot of them are smaller, younger brands that are growing, and they're doing it and they're doing everything right from the beginning, so it's like you can support brands now that you're checking all these boxes and doing like really, really, really great work. But if you were to if you were to go to somewhere like, you could like go in person to, like, most sustainable brands don't have locations where people live, like if you're
Yep.
like in LA or New York or something, you're going
Yeah.
to be lucky. And otherwise though, so I would say, like, honestly though, it's just that like so many of these collections in that I've looked at, like they're just not really doing that good at all. So like, I
Yeah.
think if you're going to consider them, I think you really have to look for, because they're just not, they haven't been up to par. And like, so I think you really have to look for the big things. Like, like if they're putting out one of these collections, like you really should be looking for, like, if it's fair trade certified, like like they've got to go really big with like the certifications and the proof, because it's just like, from my experience looking at these brands and researching them, like across the board, if that's not what you're seeing, it's not good enough. So I would say, like, from the big brands, like I would say you've got to find that kind of, those kind of certifications. Like we work with smaller brands where it's like, they're not fair trade certified, but they pay living wages and they publish that, and we check that in our research. But the thing is, you're not going to find that from one of these bigger brands, so
Yeah.
like so they really need hard evidence. Like they really need that certification.
So maybe the better question would be, is that if it's not these big brand, right? If people are just searching for certain things, or like a brand is advertising on Instagram or TikTok or Snapchat or Facebook, whatever it may be, that says they're sort of sustainable, right? But like Eco-Stylist has a pretty rough criteria where 9 out of the 10 brands fail your criteria, right? So let's say it's one of those 9, right? But their marketing is really good. Like, what can consumers look for? Is it just sort of those labels that really sort of seals the deal?
Yeah. Okay. So in that case, no, that's a great question. So that's really about transparency, and because what we find is, like, so like 9 out of 10 brands fill our criteria. But when we drill down to, like, because obviously we've really like refined our list so that we're not setting ourselves up for failure, because we also don't have the time to research like 10 brands and have only one pass. So we've really
Sure.
funneled it down to where, like, we're looking at what's like a pre-vetted list of brands that we believe are going to pass, and then like it's like I think like 40% of those pass. So it's like, and then like 60% of them fail. And we're still seeing a lot of is like, the issues aren't, it's not with those brands, it's not that they don't have certifications, it's usually like that they're not transparent enough, or they're not putting enough information on their website. And that information is critical. Like, so because what we'll see, like, for example, is, and sometimes these brands are doing good, but and customers will sometimes push back on this. Well, they'll say, like, well, what if they're really doing good and they're just not putting it on their website? And it's like, well, yes, like, exactly, but we're arguing that it's important that they put it on their website. We'll see brands say like ethically made, and then they don't elaborate. And it's just that, like, the point is, like, we're trying to help consumers filter through this noise, and you can't tell if it is actually ethically made if they don't.
That's what I'm saying. It's such a like broad, not a broad statement, but it's a very generic statement that you could just say it, right? And like, it's, consumers might not know the wiser if like they trust a brand just because they say it, right? But that's the tough battle, because I see a lot of that. I do see a lot of that where they kind of just say it, but then you kind of drill down a little bit more. And I could see how, maybe consumers would just take it at face, right? And probably purchase from them, but I'm like, I wouldn't personally do that, right? Going back to brands, as you were talking about, how can they do better on their sites? Now, obviously, some sites may not drill down because they don't want to, right? Because maybe they are not maybe as sustainable or ethical as they think they are, or they could be. But how would you recommend, if they are, like, to present that on the site better, right? Is there any recommendations you would give?
Yeah. I mean, well, I will point out one thing, like, with living wages is one, I think it's a big issue. So we'll just as one isolated issue there. I just want to put, if a brand isn't saying or giving evidence that they're doing that, they're almost definitely not. So I do want to say that, like, I think it's really, really, and we've looked at a lot of brands. I would say it's the extremely rare case that they actually are paying living wages and they're just not talking about it, because that's such a rare position in the fashion industry. So if a brand is doing it, they want to talk about it. And if they're not talking about it, it's because they can't prove it. And the only exception to that we've found is with brands that are made in the USA. And that's because that's a niche area where brands made in the USA will assume that you assume their living wages. And then, and we drill down a little further where we're like, well, we happen to know that like made in USA doesn't necessarily guarantee living wages. So like, we, you know what I mean? And so we've been able to push brands in those cases to be like, okay, we pay 1.5 times minimum wage to our like lowest paid employee. So like, yeah, that's, you know what I mean? But that's an exception. But anyway, the point is like with that issue in particular, like I don't think you should ever assume a brand is doing it if they're not saying, because it's just such a like, it's such a radical position to be doing it. And it's an awesome thing to do. And brands tell you when they're doing it. So
I guess living wages is one thing, right?
yeah.
And is it their about page that they need to ramp up more? Would you say
Oh
they
yeah,
should
yeah.
move things up to their homepage, like get in depth with living wages versus, you know, the materials? And I guess the good brands kind of go in depth with all this stuff, and you can kind of really see that they care and they've taken the time to like drill down into the nerdiness of it, if you will. But like, why? And if brands do it, I imagine like they take the extra work out because they care and they do that. So that's kind of one thing I look for personally, you know, is on websites, is that like, do they take the time to really drill down with this stuff?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, so like I just having those extra pages, exactly. Like I don't think it doesn't need to be, you know, on a brand's homepage or anything, but they should have, whether it's, you know, a transparency page or an about page, you know, within there they should have like the different layers. And so I would recommend that brands have, you know, have like a transparency page, which I don't know if like, and when we're looking at that, we're really looking at brands acknowledging how much transparency they have, you know. So it's like we know, it's like this is where our garments are sewn, and you know, this is where the fabric comes from, and we don't know where the buttons come from or something. Like honestly, you know what I mean? Like that's what we really mean, is like being honest about the whole supply chain. And then with the other pieces, like honestly, like having either a separate page or a section about, you know, about ethical manufacturing, and one about the environment, you know. And it's like, and with the environment being as tangible as you can, right? Like do you have goals? What are those goals? Like, are you meeting them? Really trying to be
Or
more
you're part
specific.
of an organization, maybe. There's certain ways. Stripe Climate, I use Stripe Climate for everything, but there's kind of these simple ways to just start out to kind of do the environmental side of things. But yeah, I mean, there's so many different things out there that you can do or you could do. But at the end of the day, I think that's why these platforms are needed, man. That's why Eco-Stylist is there, and that's why other platforms out there that do good work as well, like, it's needed. You know, it's stuff that we consumers need to go to make these purchases, because like we said before, it might be a little expensive, you know. So I think if you want to spend this type of money, I think you want to know what you're getting, right? And I think it's important. It's a very important factor.
Yeah, definitely. No, for sure. Yeah, you want like good quality clothes, and you also, yeah, you want to spend money on supporting brands and causes you believe in. So, but I think getting tangible is really important, because I think consumers are wanting that more. You know what I mean? Like consumers are becoming savvier, and so they're not really going to accept anymore something that's too vague, because it starts to look like greenwashing, even if it's not. You know, so it's like,
Yeah.
it's like if it's just a page that's like, we manufacture more sustainably, right? People just want more than that. They want, you know, like if you're members of organizations like the ones you mentioned, like 1% for the planet, et cetera, like just saying what those tangible things are, instead of that builds trust with consumers. Like they're going to see that and they're going to say, okay,
Yeah.
I see you're doing real things, and I like that. So
I'll end on a little bit about what's in your closet. What's your favorite sort of product right now that you like, that's sort of your go-to a lot lately? As winter approaches, what are you rocking? What are you wearing these days?
well, I just got this. I was showing you in the beginning, but I just got this hat from Known Supply. These are a limited release, so we're not selling these, but they have
They are
1,000
sweet. They are sweet.
Yeah, but you can get them. Like the Known Supply sells them as blanks, and they also sell them for organizations. So like any you know, company, organization, brand can order them in bulk and get them embroidered and sell them. And but just to be honest, that's one piece that I've really been loving, because I just been wearing that all the time, and it's just
It is
really
sweet. It's very nice. And Known Supply is great, man. So like, kudos to them.
Yeah, such a great brand. I've been a huge fan for a long time, and obviously they're one of our certified brands. And yeah, it's just a really high quality hat. So I'm pretty, like, I've been wearing this a lot. And then yeah, honestly, like I actually love colder weather. You know, I have tons of jackets and things that I really like. Like I have one of these wool ambassador blazers from Outer Known that I really like as like a layering piece. It's really fun because like it's a more casual style blazer, right? So it's like you could, like, sure, you could wear it with a button down and, like, you know, and look nicer when you need to, but you could also wear it with like a t-shirt or like throw it over a sweater. And so I just find it to be like this really cool piece that like blends,
It's versatile.
Exactly. Yeah, so like I would say that one, and then I also have this one that's kind of similar from Taylor Stitch. It's a jacket. It's like it's made with like reclaimed fibers, and it's it like sort of like the collar converts, so it can look like a blazer or it can look like a what's the word for that? It can look like kind of like a chore jacket, and so it's yeah. So I'm really like those are kind of
they have some really nice stuff as well. Yeah, Taylor Stitch has some good stuff.
Yeah, so those are two like layering pieces that I really like.
Well, amazing, man. Well, thank you so much. It's been great catching up. Love to always hear your insights of what you're seeing and what's going on, because you got your ear to the industry, man, and it's always great to hear your side of things. And I appreciate you taking the time, and can't wait to catch up again. Maybe we'll do this after the holidays to see how it went for you. See if you're past the stress. Maybe take a vacation or something like that.
Yeah.
But best of luck, my man, for the rest of this year. Get through the holidays, and we'll talk soon.
Thanks for having me on the show. It was a pleasure chatting with you, and yeah, hope you have a good holidays too.